Namaste and welcome in the series of cybersecurity. This side is Meena. Today I will discuss about why have DNS attacks increased by 4788%. It's huge. Why hackers are targeting DNS servers, or what type of attacks the hackers are performing on DNS servers. So today's session will be really very informative, very interesting. So guys, share this session with your friends and let them to know about DNS server and what type of attacks can happen on DNS server. So let's start today's session. DNS server is the cornerstone of internet, and how that's become the cornerstone of internet. The devices which are on network, whether that's on local area network of a company, okay, or whether the devices on WAN, that's for example say internet, all devices are having a unique ID, okay. That unique ID is the IP address. IP address, whether that's IP version 4 or IP version 6. Each and every machine is having a IP address, and those are communicating with the help of those IP addresses, because they are identifying the devices on the network via these IP addresses. But being a human, it's very difficult or kind of impossible to remember all those numbers. So we just remember the people or the machines or the domain names via name. It's very easy for us to remember somebody, something with the help of the name, okay. So there is a gap. Machine are communicating with IP addresses which they are having, and being a human, we understand, we remember the name. So we need a system, or we can say a kind of translator, which can translate the IP address into the domain name or domain name into IP addresses, okay. That's why DNS servers are the cornerstone, or we can say foundation for the internet, okay. Whatever we are typing in our browser, whatever the domain name we are typing, to reach to that particular domain name, it needs the IP address. So just things resolve so quickly, even before the just we blink our eyes, and it's really very complex phenomena behind the resolution is happening from domain name to the IP addresses, okay. So just let's have a look how it's working, and just I have created a small demonstration of it, okay. For example, open your command prompt and over there write ping and domain name, okay. For example, say I wrote here google.com, okay, and whatever the IP address you will get after that in the reply of that ping, take that IP address and write it on the address bar of the browser and press enter. So whatever the IP address is this domain name is having, or the server is having, that website will be opened, okay. So in this way, they whether just we write IP address in the address bar of the browser or the domain name. So which is easy for us? Easy for us is just to remember google.com, except the IP address of that, okay. So this thing translation is done by DNS servers, okay. So how does it work? For example, I just take an example of www.luminisindia.com. Generally we write in our address bar, that that kind of you can say domain name. Okay, and even we don't observe a dot in the end automatically will present. Okay, and what's that dot? That dot represent the root. Okay, so what is root server? Around the world there are 13 sets of root servers placed where they are resolving the domain names, or we can say just having the information about the top level domain name servers. Okay, and what's that top level domain servers? For example, different websites, whether that's related to .com, .net, .org, .gov, for that's related to government. So number of websites that registered, for example, there can be huge number of websites that register under .com. Okay, so the top level domain server will handle or just to get the information of all the domain name registered under the .com. Similar thing also happen in .org, .gov or .net or many other domain name, top level domain name servers. Okay, so let's have a look how does it works in case of when we make a query. Okay, for example, from our PC or laptop, we just open the web browser and in the address bar we wrote the domain name like example.com. Okay, because previously, for example, it's not visited that website, so first time it's making the query to DNS resolver, which is the DNS server IP addresses provided by our ISP, or that can be also configured in by our company. Okay, so DNS resolver will check its database whether that's record in its database or if that entry exists in its cache. Okay, if that DNS resolver will not find yes this entry doesn't exist, so from where it will start to search? As I told you in the previous slide, there is a dot in the end of whatever the domain name we are typing in the address bar. Okay, although we don't type it, but that automatically exists, and that represents the root server. Okay, so first it will take its request recursive query to the root server, which are 13 sets of root server around the world which are having the information about the top level domain servers. Okay, so the DNS resolver will ask to domain root server, do you know what's the IP address for the example.com? And root server will say, no, I don't know, but I know the IP address of the top level domain server which can help you to find out the IP address of example.com. Okay, for example, in the end there is that exists in .com. Okay, so root server will give the IP address of top level domain server which is having the information about the .com. Okay, and DNS resolver will take its request to the top level domain server. Okay, which is provided by the root. Once it will reach to that TLD server, it will ask, okay, what's the IP address of the example.com, and TLD server will say, okay, I don't know what the IP address of the example.com, but I can give you the IP address of the authoritative DNS server which is having the entries that's related to example.com or maintaining all the records that's related to it. Okay, so it will give the IP address of the example.com authoritative server, where that server, DNS server, will tell what is the IP address for this particular query. Okay, once the DNS resolver will get it, so it will just contact to the authoritative server, and authoritative server will give the IP address. Okay, and once the DNS resolver will receive the IP address, it will send that reply to the particular PC, and the browser will get the IP address of the domain name what we entered in the address bar of our browser, so it will just directly contact to that particular web server. Okay, so it's really very complex, and why we need to understand right now here, because until unless we don't understand the working of the DNS server, we will not able to understand how the attackers are performing attacks over the DNS server. So there are two things are happening. One is, every time whatever the DNS server, they are checking its cache. Okay, whether recently they have resolved that query, so that can stay in the cache. It's depend upon how much is the age for that existence of that particular query. Okay, or whatever the time period they can store. Or any company can establish their DNS server. So there are possibility of the attack is, if the attacker will change the cache of the DNS server with the wrong IP address, so there can be attack. Or attacker can also establish their own malicious DNS server. Clear? Or with the help of the DNS messages, attackers can collect the data from our computer, our companies, and they can send in the form of the DNS messages, because every devices has to open the port number 53, which is used for TCP and UDP port. Okay, if the message size is less than 512 byte, it is just to use the UDP port number, and if the message size is bigger than 512 bytes, it will just use the TCP port number. Okay, so every device need to open that port. So for the attacker, a way is there, they can perform the attack with the help of the DNS. Okay, so let's see how the DNS amplification kind of attack happens. For example, attacker just know the IP address of the server which is inside a company. Okay, and it just making some kind of, whether that can be a web server or the e-commerce type of server, and attacker choose to attack on that particular server. So how it will perform with the help of the DNS amplification attack. Now attacker will just spoof the IP address of that particular target server's IP address. Okay, and as we have seen, who is sending the DNS request as a client, server will respond to that particular query to the responder. Okay, who just send the request. In this way, attacker will also perform attack on the target machine. For example, attacker created a network of malicious or just we can say botnet, which are just hijacked or controlled by the attackers, and there are in this particular bot network there can be thousands of millions of devices, and if the query, DNS query sent to those from those devices to a DNS server, but the IP address of a source will be the target machine. So the reply DNS server when send the reply, it will just go to that particular target machine. Okay, so that server will be busy to reply to just see those type DNS type of queries, and when the legitimate user will make a request, it will be busy with DNS queries, and there can be a lot of damage to the business. Okay, and attacker even can send a huge data in the form of DNS messages. Clear? So it will make busy to the DNS server. So that's why this DNS amplification attack increased by 4,788%. This is the latest report generated by the Nexus Guard. Okay, so highest kind of attack is happening on the DNS. Another kind of attack also happen when the when the attackers will also poison the cache. As I told you, every record that's it's just finding, they just keep in their cache memory, and if the attacker will also change that, for example, in this case a user is sending request to the nicebank.com, and when the DNS server, that's local DNS server, will resolve that query before the legitimate DNS server will send the reply to the local DNS server which requested for nice.com, attacker will send its malicious or just wrong DNS reply. Okay, so when the user will request to particular domain name, it will just land on the wrong website which is established by the hackers. Okay, in this way they can create the DNS cache poisoning. So guys, this session really very helpful to understand how DNS is working and what type of attack can happen on DNS server. So you can join me on Cybersecurity Prism and share that video and like that videos, so that you will also get more information related to cybersecurity, and your friend will also get information related to Cybersecurity Series. So in next video or in next live session, I will discuss about a powerful method to defend against multiple cyber attacks. So what it will be. Stay safe. Namaste. See you in the next session.